Thanks so much, everybody, for coming. It's lovely to see so many people here. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself, I'm from San Diego, and we were fortunate to move here a year and a half ago. So I'm new to the Pacific Islands and loving it, so really excited to be here. And my background is actually in wildlife reproductive biology. So I'm actually not a marine biologist. I'm just masquerading as one. So if you have lots of interesting turtle questions, I'll aim to answer them, but we have other turtle scientists in the room with us, including Alex Reiniger here in the front row. We'll have a couple others that show up throughout the talk. So feel free to interrupt me as I go if I haven't made any sense, you need me to explain it better. And I'll also try to ask you guys to get involved too. So today I'm going to tell you about some research we've been conducting for several years that I started when I was in San Diego and then have continued since I moved out to Hawaii. And we're using hormones to figure out the sex of immature turtles. And that's why I have blood plasma tubes on the slide here, because those are integral to our research, and that's turtle blood there. So without getting turtle blood in the blood tubes. So the clear to sort of yellow part is where the hormones are, and that's what we use to figure out the sex. And I'll explain more in detail, but we're using the sex of turtles to figure out the sex ratio and look at the potential effects of climate change on sea turtle sex ratios throughout the Pacific. Woo! Alrighty. So why do we even care about sea turtles? Well, they're ecosystem engineers, which means they transport nutrients. So if you've ever seen a female turtle up on the beaches covering herself in sand or covering her nest in sand, she'll take that sand back out into the ocean on her back. So they're nutrient transporters. They're also considered the lawnmowers of the sea. They eat algae and seagrass. So they're very important for keeping the reefs healthy. So sea turtles are a main conservation priority for NOAA Fisheries and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And in order to manage the turtles, they do status assessments. You might have heard how sea turtle populations are endangered or threatened. So NOAA is involved in doing that and figuring out whether the populations are indeed, oh, it popped out again.
Yeah. Keep clicking. Sorry, just keep clicking. Yeah, right there.
With the mouse?
The mouse.
Okay, got it. So the Hawaiian population is actually threatened with extinction. So that was one of the listings that they most recently came out with. We're also involved in critical habitat designation. So if there's any foraging grounds in the area that are really important for turtles, we'll also highlight those. And then they also do recovery plans. So trying to figure out at what point turtles have recovered from lower population numbers. So within the US waters, there are 6 species of sea turtles. Does anybody know how many species of sea turtles there are? Any guesses? There's more than 6. Okay, there's 7. So there's only one that we don't have in US waters, and it happens to be the flatback turtle, which you can find in Australia or Papua New Guinea waters. There's some seats in here, guys, if you want to fill in. These are more turtle people. Ask them questions. So within the US waters, we have turtles that either forage or nest here, and that's the green sea turtle, leatherback, loggerhead, hawksbill, Kemp's ridley, and the olive ridley. And the Kemp's ridley is only found in the Gulf of Mexico, so you'll never find them around here. So today I'm going to focus my talk on the green sea turtle, which you guys obviously call here is the honu. So they're really important to us here in the Pacific Islands, and I'd like to focus on them for that reason. So there's many threats to sea turtles, and I put this up here not to be mean, but it's actually for me to remember to give you a public service announcement. If you are a fisher or you know people who are fishermen, we really encourage you to please help the turtles if you capture them, reel them in, and cut the line as close to the hook as possible so that there isn't line just hanging out in the water, because they get entangled like that and then they can't get away from it. So PSA, cut the line as close to the hook as you can. So we're also looking at threats like climate change upon sea turtles, pollution, so that could be ingestion of plastics or just other things in the water that they get entangled in. There's harvest of turtles, and there's disease. We have fibropapilloma here in Hawaii. You guys have probably seen some turtles with tumors swimming in the foraging grounds, or even up on the beach on the North Shore. We also have concern with bycatch in either commercial fisheries, and then we also have concerns with habitat degradation. So with all these threats in mind, sea turtles are designated as either endangered or threatened in the Pacific, and we have 5 main distinct population segments. What does that mean? Just these populations are pretty much genetically distinct from each other. So we have 3 that are threatened with populations of about, hang on, I'm using the mouse, I promise. I don't see mouse. There it is. Okay, so there's about 3,800 to 3,000 down there towards Australia. And then we also have 2 that are endangered. So one that's about 6,500 and then one that's about 2,600. And so since these populations are endangered or threatened, we're really interested to get general information on them, particularly at the foraging grounds. And I'm going to explain why. Most of the time, you guys have probably heard about sea turtles and their mating or their nesting. They leave their foraging ground and do a breeding migration every couple of years. They'll migrate down towards their mating grounds, and this is where the males and females will do their business. And then when the males have finished, they'll go back to their foraging grounds. The females will stay for a couple of months doing nesting events about every 2 weeks. And when they're finished with their nesting events, they'll go back to their foraging ground. And then you have the hatchlings, which are produced. They come out of the nest, they go down the beach, and then they swim out into the open ocean. And they're out there for many years, could be up to 20 years. This is 2, we're not sure. We essentially call those the lost years because they're hard to find and we don't know much information about them. But once they get big enough to these foraging grounds, which ends up being an amalgamation of adult turtles, immature turtles, and then these new little recruits that have just come in. So it's a great place to study a wide range of animals within a population. So that's why we focus on the foraging ground. And why is the foraging ground really important? Well, a lot of information is lacking for sea turtles that we need to include in these status assessments. Particularly at foraging grounds, we don't know much about the sex ratios. So while we know the number of female turtles coming up on nesting beaches, we have no idea how many turtles are in the forage they are. Does anybody know how sea turtle sex is determined? So in
temperature?
Yes, exactly. So it's not genetics as you would think. So in humans, we have X and Y chromosomes, and generally you can tell humans apart by the way that they look. But in turtles, they don't have sex chromosomes, so you can't figure out their sex using genetics. Yeah, interesting, right? So as he said, thank you, their incubation temperature in the nest determines the temperature or determines the sex of the turtles. So warmer temperatures produce more females and cooler temperatures produce more males. And this is very typical in a lot of reptile species. So what they have is temperature dependent sex determination. So I'm going to try to walk you through this a little bit. So on the left axis, you have the proportion of female turtles, and on the bottom axis, you have the temperature, hang on. So there's a pivotal temperature which produces 50% male and 50% female, which is about 29 degrees. So in Fahrenheit, I wrote it down because I don't know, it's 84.2 degrees. So keep that in mind, about 84 degrees. So then if you just drop it by 1 degree Celsius to 28 degrees, you produce about 20% females, so 80% males. And if you bump up that temperature that produces 50% male and 50% female by 1 degree to 30 degrees Celsius, which is 86 degrees Fahrenheit, you produce about 80% female. So because of this, with the increasing temperatures, we're concerned about the effects of rising temperatures due to climate change. So as the temperatures increase, you get an even more female bias in your population. So this climate change might have a potential influence regionally or globally. So we're trying to look at populations within little pockets as well as within whole ocean basins. So these are our current foraging grounds that we've been looking at. So this one here is San Diego Bay off the coast of California, and then Long Beach just north of that. And those turtles there come all the way up from Mexico. So they do all their nesting and breeding in Mexico and forage off California. We also have foraging grounds within Hawaii that we've looked at. And then over on the West Pacific, there's Saipan in the Mariana Islands and Guam. And then we also have a population to the south in the Northern Great Barrier Reef of Australia. So we've got some capture methods that we use. In California, we use entangle nets because the water is not clear there. It's quite murky, so it's difficult to capture turtles just by hand. So we'll set nets out, as you can see in the boat. And then once a turtle becomes entangled, we go out, grab the turtle and the net, and put it in the boat, and then unentangle the turtle, put the net back, and take the turtle to shore. In Guam and Saipan, we capture turtles by free diving. In this picture here is Jesse. He was a previous hunter for sea turtles turned conservationist. So he is incredible at capturing turtles. He's like a shark in the water. It's a sight to see. I do have a video of him, so hopefully everybody online can see this too. So the turtle is here. It's a little murky, but you'll see he sneaks up on the turtle. Most of the time, Jesse tries to get the turtles when they're not swimming in the water because it's much more difficult to sneak up on them. But you can see he came from way above. The turtle doesn't even notice him, and then he gets it. And then he goes straight up to the surface. And the arm here on the left is Dr. T. Chaj Jones, which is in the audience now. He's the leader of our program. So if you guys have questions about turtles, he's here to help too. So this is a green, and it's an immature turtle. Well, that was pretty much the end of the video anyway, so. And then we bring it up onto the boat. And then in Australia, they use the rodeo technique. I had the pleasure of doing this, and I'm going to show you a video, but my attempt was not very glamorous. So essentially, you sit on the front of a very quick-moving boat. You spot the turtle, which is this right here. All the other things that are in the water could be turtles, like something like that, but it's not. It's a coral reef head. And you wear your helmet, just in case. So this is an interesting video because this turtle evaded us. So you'll see that I am about to jump, and then it takes a quick right turn. But and did you guys see it go off to the right? Yeah. I was scared for my life on the front of that boat, I can tell you that. But it was really fun too. So you can see there's 3 different boats capturing turtles in this coral atoll. We lived on the island for 16 days. We brought in all of our food and water, and oh yeah, there I went. Yay! There's other people who make it look much better, but anyways. Okay, so getting back to sea turtles and their sex. Does anybody know which turtle is the male in this photo?
Big tail.
Big tail, yes, that's right. So the turtle on the left is the male, and we know that because he has a long tail, compared to the turtle on the right, which is a female turtle with a short tail. But if you put 2 immature turtles side by side, like these don't even poke out past the carapace. So you can't tell juvenile turtles apart by their tail length. So one way to figure out their sex is to do a laparoscopy, where you insert a laparoscope, similar to if you had a knee surgery, someone would insert one into your knee and do the surgery. This is Cole Olympus. He is a scientist in Australia, and he's been doing research and this procedure for probably 40 years. It's quick. It happens in about 5 minutes, and they visualize the gonad and can quickly tell the sex, and then they suture the turtle back up and release it immediately. So besides laparoscopy, the other way you can figure out the sex of a turtle is to collect a blood sample from the jugular vein in their neck, which is also called the dorsal cervical sinus. It feels like a water balloon if you palpate it in there, like if you touch it, it bounces back at you. And we collect the blood sample into the blood tube, and then we take it back to the lab and spin it down, and it looks like that first photo I showed with the yellow plasma at the top. So in immature males, the testosterone concentration is about 300 picograms per mil or higher, and then in the females, it's about 100 picograms per mil or less. So the methods, I won't bore you too much, but I just want to give you a little bit of information. So we extract the hormones from the blood plasma using some chemical solvents. The mouse is evading me. There it is. And then you take that extract of hormone, put it on this 96-well plate. Essentially, it's a commercially available kit that one would normally use to run for human testosterone concentrations, which we have proven works for turtles. And then some chemistry happens, and you get a color reaction. And it's, can you guys see the differences there? The yellow and the whitish sort of clear color? So we have standards that are provided in the kit. They go from 0 to 2,000 picograms, with 0 being more yellow and 2,000 being more clear. So for example, this unknown turtle, because we run them in duplicate to make sure we didn't make a mistake, that one's very clear. What concentration do you guys think that would be? Anybody? Sure. Sounds well. It's more like 2,000. See how like clear this one is compared to those? So it's around 2,000. Anyways, so that would be a male turtle. There's way more intricate details that go into it than that. But based on that concentration, it would be a male. So looking at this one here, the more yellow one, that's more in the lower concentrations, around 3 to 7. So that would be a female turtle. So to give you an idea of what the hormone concentrations look like in a population, this is from the San Diego Bay population. So we have immature females in pink, the lightest pink, and then adult females in the darker pink, immature males in this lighter blue, and then the darker blue are the adult males. And as you can see, there's a lot more pink than blue here. And the sex ratio for this population was 2.8 females to 1 male. So this is for the overall population, including immatures and adults.
What's the brown? Yeah, a little bit. Brown.
This one here? Yeah. So those are the unknowns. I'm gonna tell you what those are in a minute. Yeah. So here we have all of the populations and different testosterone concentrations. And for the females, you can see they're all around or less than 40 picograms per mil. So pretty low. And then for the males, they're all, most of them, above 1,000, except for the Hawai'i group in Australia. Their average was about 450 or so. So then we had some turtles that fell within the range that was in between the known ranges for males and females. So we considered those unknown. But what we've done is use those concentrations from the known sex turtles to predict the sex of these unknowns. So for San Diego, we had only we were unsure of, and that the model that we created for that predicted that those 3 turtles were female, and one of those turtles actually died, and we did a necropsy on it, and we found out that it indeed was a female. So we were able to predict the sex fairly well. And then for these 24 turtles in Australia, we also ran the model and were able to predict those sexes too. But out of the total number of turtles, it's, I don't know, 10% that we weren't able to figure out definitively by hormone concentration and had predicted. So with that in mind, what were the sex ratios? In San Diego, it was 3.5 females to 1 male. In Long Beach, it was 7 females to 1 male. Hawaii, 3.4. Saipan, 2.0. This is new data. I just updated it today, actually. And in Guam, it was 2.8. And in Australia, it was 3.3. And these are just for the immature portion of the population, not the overall. So what does this sort of mean when you look at it on the ground? Oh, right. Back in the 80s, Hawaii did a study on foraging sea turtles and their sex ratio using the laparoscopy technique. And they figured out that the ratio was 1-to-1 back then. So since the early 80s, we've already seen a little bit of a jump up in the number of females in the population. Yeah. So when you compare all the populations together, you can see that they're all biased towards females. They're greater than that 1-to-1 ratio of males to females. But what I want you to focus on here is that when you look at the immature population compared to the overall population, we're seeing an even greater increase in the number of females in the population. So we're wondering if we're starting to see an influence of climate change producing more female hatchlings coming off the nesting beach, which are now recruiting to our foraging grounds. So to test that hypothesis, we went to Australia. It's one of the best places to do that in the world, because they've been studying this population for over 40 years, and they also know the genetic makeup of those turtles to figure out which nesting beaches those hatchlings were produced on. So this is up here in the Northern Great Barrier Reef where we did our study, and they have been collecting skin samples from the nesting females for quite some time to figure out the genetic structure. And what this pie chart is mitochondrial DNA. But the main thing I want you to take away from this is that the colors in this are quite different than the colors in that, which means they're genetically distinct. You can tell the Northern Great Barrier Reef turtles apart from those from the Southern Great Barrier Reef. So when we were up here capturing the turtles, like I showed you in that video, those were those turtles that we captured. It's a mixing of turtles from the Northern Great Barrier Reef and the Southern Great Barrier Reef. But we didn't know who they were until we ran their genetics. So on the left axis of this graph, you have the percentage of females in the population. And on the bottom, you have the stage class. So you have juveniles, subadults, and adults. And these figures are the females. So the ones on the left in the bar graphs. Hang on. And then these ones are the males. And then the ones in the red are from the Northern Great Barrier Reef. And the ones in the blue are from the Southern Great Barrier Reef. So what I want you to focus on is this. There's no red here. In the males, there's no red. There's no male turtles from the Northern Great Barrier Reef in the subadult and juvenile populations. So what we've pretty much found is that there's 99% females in the immature stage class within this population. And this is one of the largest populations of green sea turtles in the world, so they're doing incredibly well. So that was a startling finding for us because we thought, wow, this population's doing great. But what's going to happen in 20 years when these turtles become mature? Are there going to be males around for them to mate with? So that's my question now. How many males are enough? And that's what I gave you guys the title for when I started this talk, is because I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, but we're trying to find out for sure. And the Hawaii population is really unique, and it will allow us, help allow us answer that question, because the males come to shore to bask here. So we can figure out their genetics as well, and then you can potentially use those genetics to figure out which males are mating with which females and producing the hatchlings within the nesting beaches. So we can get an idea of how often males are mating and with how many females they're mating with. And males tend to reproduce more frequently than females will. It seems like they go every 2 to 3 years, maybe even every year. We have a male that came back this year that Alex numbered last year on the nesting beach. So it's possible that the males are mating more frequently than the females are. So that's a really good thing to know about them. So when we found this out, we were wondering, could it be climate change that's producing only these females? So we looked at the sand temperatures on the nesting beaches in the past, so 50, 60 years. Within that foraging ground in Australia are about, 30 to 50 years old. So looking back in time, what did the air temperatures look like when they were adults? And as you can see here, looking at the pivotal temperature, there are years where it's warmer and cooler than that pivotal temperature. So likely producing a smattering of females and male hatchlings. When you look at the subadults in this time range, because that's about how old they would be in the past like 20 to 30 years, there's hardly any, if at all, year would have been cool enough to produce males. Then if you look at the juveniles, which would be like, 10 years old on average, there's 1 year that it looks like they could have produced some males. So we're pretty sure that it's the increasing temperatures on the nesting beaches that could be causing this change. So we're really interested to see what's going to happen in the next 20 years. So what made this study awesome is that we could use the hormone information to figure out the sex, and then use the genetics to find out which nesting beaches those turtles came from. And there are some turtles in the Pacific Island region that we can do that with, where their genetics are distinct enough. So we're going to try to replicate that study with some other populations. Oh yeah, the National Geographic news story was written about our paper. It's a really cool story, and there's a nice video right at the beginning. If you guys Google it, it's pretty cool. You might want to watch it. So what are our findings? Testosterone concentration range for immature turtles varies by foraging aggregation. There's a female bias in the green turtle foraging aggregations, and particularly in that immature stage class. And we are going to use this sex ratio data as baseline information to model potential effects of climate change. And one of our scientists at the Science Center, Dr. Summer Martin, is really interested in looking at the effects of climate change on hatchling sex ratio and modeling that. So we have data loggers that we're putting in the nest to monitor the temperatures. And we're also interested in embryonic death. So not only does temperature rise produce more females, temperature rise also cooks the eggs in the nets and causes embryonic death. So that's another thing we're looking at as well. And then, as I mentioned before, we're looking at the genetic origin of our immature turtles in the Pacific Island region, so we can replicate that study from Australia. And I'm going to try to figure out how many males are enough. That's my next goal. Other hormone projects that we've been working on is actually taking very small volumes of blood from hatchlings that are live before they go down to the beach and go out into the open ocean to figure out their sex. So in addition to the data loggers in the nest to figure out the temperature, so we can kind of get an idea of what the hatchling sex ratio should be, we might be able to get some blood samples from them too to figure out their sex using hormones. We also are looking at the effects of water temperature upon testosterone, and interestingly, as the water gets colder, testosterone decreases as well. So we're also trying to be careful about when we collect our blood samples and making sure that they're not during times of cold water. I've also been involved in placing wild turtles that were in for rehab that cannot be re-released back into the wild, into their forever homes and aquariums and stuff like that. So they want to be able to manage their turtles in the aquariums well, so they want to keep males with males and females with females, so we'll help provide them with the sex for that turtle. I'm also interested in looking at stress response. I studied that in a previous life, and I wanted to apply it to turtles, so we've started looking at that as well. And this one I'm really looking forward to. So how many people know that trees have growth rings and you can age trees? Yes. So turtles have something similar in their bones where they lay down growth layers, and you can use those layers to figure out the age of the turtle because you know when it died, so you can backtrack it using those growth layers to figure out its age at other time points. What you can do is collect the bone powder from those different growth layers. And we started a pilot study where you can look at the hormone concentration in those growth layers. We don't know a lot about the age of sexual maturity for turtles, so I'm hoping that with the hormones and knowing the age of the turtles by the skeletal chronology, we can start to figure out at what age do they reach sexual maturity. Right now it's thought it's about 25 years on average, but it could be less or it could be more. So that's a really important information for us to figure out. None of this work would be possible without all of my collaborators. This takes a family of good friends and colleagues to make it happen. and of course some amazing interns, one of which is in the room. Liberty Boyd helped me this summer produce all the results, the new results that I just put in from Guam and Saipan. So thanks to all of the interns that helped me along the way. And mahalo. Thanks for coming along.
Nature's been at this a long time. I know the world's gone through ice ages and hot periods. Have you guys postulated any kind of evolutionary advantage for sex being determined by temperature?
I have been asked that question so many times, and I have no idea.
Anybody thought about no postulations of why that would be? Or?
I personally haven't, and the scientist that's a geneticist on this hasn't figured it out. T. Todd, I'm looking at you. Is there anybody who's thought about that?
I'm familiar with any studies or papers that demonstrate significance of sex would show that. I'm sure there'd be some stuff in there and other organisms there that.
Yeah, I think if I dug deep, I might find something about, I don't know, crocodiles or alligators or something. People like
crocodiles are temperature sensitive, kind of thing.
They are, but they're opposite. It's warmer, it produces males. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Does temperature determine the sex of the inland lake, land, the turtles that would be in freshwater also?
It should, yeah. Most reptiles have temperature-dependent sex determination, yeah.
And what about tortoises?
Yeah, I think so too. I don't know if they're similar to crocodiles or if they're similar to like normal turtles. I would think that they are, but I can find out and get back to you.
What accounts for the strange number in Long Beach as opposed to the other? So many people. Can't be that much warmer up there. You have the Humboldt current and the cold water.
Right. So those turtles are coming from nesting beaches in Mexico. So we need to go to Mexico to figure out how warm their nesting beaches are. And unfortunately, where they nest are very remote islands off of the coast of Mexico. But in terms of the Long Beach one, I think we need more numbers. We haven't caught a ton of turtles up there. So I think we need to increase how many turtles we've caught to get a better idea of how many turtles are actually female up there. Did that answer your question? Okay.
For the corticosteroids, do they alter the testosterone and estrogen levels? Why are you studying corticosteroids?
It's more of a pet project because I'm really interested in stress. Because I did it in my past life. I did a study on the effects of adolescent binge drinking and your brain stress response to that. So
increasing temperatures raise the corticosteroid. That happening?
I don't know, but those same samples that we used for the temperature decrease of water temperature on the testosterone, I'm gonna try to run those for corticosterone as well. So to be determined, but I'll get back to you. But their levels do change throughout the year. Depending on their reproductive activity, you can see changes in corticosterone levels too, yeah. There's a really cool book on it I can share with you if you're interested. Yeah.
Where are the shoreline nesting areas here?
Mainly in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, so really far away in the monument that most people don't get to go to. You can see some nesting on the main Hawaiian Islands, but it's very rare. What do we have? One nest on Oahu last year? 2? Yeah.
Less than 4%.
Yeah. Yeah. Less than 4% of the nesting occurs on the main Hawaiian Islands. You can see nesting of hawksbills on other islands, though. Maui has quite a bit, and Big Island has a little bit. Mm-hmm. So if you want to see turtles nesting, it would be the hawksbills, but there's less than 10 hawksbill turtles that nest, I think. Is that right? Give or take? Did you have a question?
No, I was going to ask if you had any work.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah, we've done sex ratio studies on other species as well. The greens have been our main focus because they're the easiest to get samples from. A lot of people will capture them and are willing to collect samples for me. But we have captured some hawksbills in Guam and Saipan, and then we are starting to ramp up our research in the main Hawaiian Islands to capture some more hawksbills. Yeah, if we can.
Another question. Turtles are dropping the eggs. Does the number of eggs add to the temperature? Because, I mean, do they generate their own heat that way?
They do have
How do you
metabolic
measure that?
heating. Yeah, they do.
So
And
more eggs, chances are you have more females.
you could, but then it might rain and then that decreases the temperature or shade or, yeah. There's so many factors that go into the temperatures of the nest. And it's only a short period where the sex is actually determined. It's the second third of the incubation period. And I think it was believed to be about 3 days, but then I went to a workshop recently and I think they changed it to 8 days. So it's always evolving.
So the turtles on the North Shore, those are not nesting turtles.
No,
Those are just, are they resting?
yeah, they're coming out to have a rest, enjoy the sun, like we do. We call those non-nesting terrestrial emergences or basking turtles. Yeah. Yeah. Terrestrial emergence. Yeah.
How far up the North American coast do you find green sea turtles?
On the West Coast,
Yeah, the West Coast.
so they've seen them probably lost all the way up into Monterey, I think. But then I think it was cold stunned. The water was too cold for them up there, so they had to rehab them down in San Diego. But the actual foraging ground, the furthest north we found is Long Beach so far. Yeah. And they like to hang out there because of the warm water effluent from the power plants. Yeah. Yeah. A little jacuzzi. And was there a question over here?
And we were just saying they do that on Maui. If you go to the power plant on Maui, they're outside in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Tons of them go and watch.
They love it. And my email, you guys are welcome to email me if you have any questions besides what you had here. Yeah. There it is. Or I have a card. I have lots of cards.